everybody in. Okay, here we go. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Happy Palm Sunday. We're excited to be here today with Sharon Oard Warner, the author of the latest book from the University of New Mexico Press, Writing the Novella. If you haven't already, go ahead and grab your notebook and a pen or your favorite writing utensil. We are going to have a writing exercise a little bit later. As you may know, I'm Amanda. I'm the Events and Marketing Director for Bookworks. I'm coming at you from my home office in Victory Hills of Albuquerque. Bookworks is located in the North Rio Grande River Valley, up on Rio Grande Boulevard. We are in a locally owned shopping center, and we are a 36-year-old local independent bookstore. I want to remind you how important it is to be shopping local right now, especially during the pandemic, but always. I'm going to tell you that Jeff Bezos doesn't need any more of your money. He doesn't even want to be Amazon anymore, folks. So please think about where your dollars are going. 70% of your dollar goes right back into your community when you shop at a local store, whether it be a bookstore, a co-op, a record shop, whatever it may be. I know things are easy to get off of Amazon, but you have to think about the return on your investment there and where your money is going. So please, please try to remember to shop local. Even if you're not with us here in Albuquerque, chances are you've got a local independent bookstore near you, or you can log on to our website and order books to be shipped. Our website is our name without the O's. So it's bkwrks.com. And I will put a link to Sharon's book in the chat, as well as a link to her website where you can find out more information about her work and her upcoming engagements. Again, if you're just joining us, I'm Amanda Sutton, the Events and Marketing Director for Bookworks, and we're here with Sharon Oard Warner to celebrate the launch of her new book, Writing the Novella. So please get ready to write, folks. All right, we're going to start out with a little talk, and then we will have some writing time, a question and answer at the end, and then a meet and greet. So let me tell you a little bit about Ms. Warner. As many of you know, she was the longtime director of the fabulous Taos Writers Conference. From 1999 to 2016, she ran that. 17 years up in beautiful Taos, mainly at the Sagebrush. And I don't know about you guys, but I miss going to that conference. We sold books there for several years, and it was incredibly fun. So we're sad that that's not around anymore, but we'll tell you a little bit later about some activities and classes that Sharon is offering now virtually. Okay, Sharon is a professor at the University of New Mexico, longtime Albuquerque resident who now lives in the wonderful Austin, Texas. She is the author of a couple of novels herself, Deep in the Heart, and the latest, Sophie's House of Cards, which is available in paperback from the University of New Mexico Press. She's also written an anthology of stories on AIDS. Her work has been published in the AWP Chronicle, Writer's Digest, and many other places. She's been working on some screenwriting lately, so maybe we can talk a little bit about that as well. And without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to her. Sharon, thank you so much for joining us. Are you there?
I'm here.
All right. Tell us a little bit about writing the novella.
Okay, so I'm gonna, let's see. Am I supposed to, I'm sorry, am I supposed to see
I'll stop
myself?
it for you. Yeah,
Okay.
At least I hope I can. Stop the screen share. You might have to try to do that on your end on another.
Okay, I'll try this. How's that?
Yeah, there you are.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi. Hello, everyone. I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you at some point in the future. But I want to begin by thanking Amanda for the wonderful introduction and for helping me with the technology here. We seem to be up and running, and I'm just delighted that there are so many of you here. Thank you very much for coming. Bookworks is my favorite bookstore, so I love it. I hate it that we're not able to sell books through the Tau Summer Writers Conference anymore, but it's wonderful to have events like this one. So thank you for coming. So I'm going to begin and end with a little information about a very unlikely writer for me to mention, and that's Ernest Hemingway. You may have, I don't know, a number of you probably see PBS fairly regularly. So you might have noticed that there's a new documentary, a new Ken Burns documentary on Hemingway that's going to, I think it's airing at the beginning of April. And some of the news clips on that have suggested that Ken Burns and Jeff Daniels, who plays the voice of Hemingway, that they both really disliked Hemingway when they were doing this, when they were doing the documentary. And you know, I've never been a really big fan of Hemingway's either until I started working on this book. And so I'm just going to tell you a little bit at the beginning of this and a little bit at the end when we do the writing prompt. But Hemingway, as you may or may not know, was very near the end of his career and his life when he started work on his novella. And his novella is The Old Man and the Sea. At the time that he started working on it, his fourth marriage was on the rocks. He'd had very bad reviews for his previous book, which was Across the River and Into the Trees. And if you don't believe me when I say really bad reviews, here's an example from the all-important Kirkus. This is just the first one line. As Hemingway's first in 10 years, this has a waiting and eager audience, but this reader, at any rate, found the novel a bitter disappointment after for whom the bell tolls. And you know, that is not the sort of review you want to get, and especially not if you're Hemingway. So he really was in a funk, and he was also aging and ailing. And so what he did was one of the smartest things he ever did, which was to funnel his fears into the heart and mind of his main character, Santiago, a fisherman. He used his life experiences, his fishing expedition of 1935, when he and a friend caught a marlin that was so large that they had to tie it to the side of their boat. And then by the time the boat reached shore, the marlin had been half eaten by sharks. Now, if you know the book, The Old Man and the Sea, and you probably do, you know that that's what happened to Santiago, only his fish ended up being, you know, turned into a massive skeleton. So I'm going to leave Hemingway now and return to the book, but I'll come back to Hemingway at the very end. So now I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes about the way this book started. When I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what a novella is. And I'm also going to talk to you about the characteristics of the novella. And after that, I'll give you a prompt and you'll do a little writing, and then we'll do some question and answer. Okay, so I'm gonna sort of talk and read, and I'll just go ahead and begin. So the book began as a class, a novella workshop that I taught at the University of New Mexico beginning in 2011. I developed the class to address one of my serious concerns about fiction writing workshops, and that is that short stories and chapters of novels get treated interchangeably. It really doesn't matter whether you turn in a short story for discussion or a chapter of a novel for discussion, they tend to get discussed in the same way. So you know what the $64,000 question is. It's does it work? Does it work? Is this working? If it's not working, why isn't it working, and how can we get it to work? That typically serves as a basis for the group discussion and later for revision suggestions. And although I think it's probably a valid question for short story, there's no way to determine whether a chapter works in the absence of other chapters. Chapters are cumulative. For their meaning, they depend on what comes before and after. And that's why it's really, I think, injurious to the chapter, to the book as a whole, to talk about independent chapters as though they were short stories. So the beauty of the novella workshop is that it offers students an intermediate step to draft a piece of prose fiction that is longer than most short stories, but shorter than most novels. So the book is divided into 15 chapters, and it provides instructors and students with the framework for a class. But it's just as useful, I think, for independent writers who are looking for a text to take the place of a class. The writing assignments correspond to the set points on Aristotle's incline, and they're consistent with storyboarding techniques that novelists, screenwriters, and playwrights all use. The focus throughout is on scenes, the building blocks of narratives. And like stories, scenes have beginnings, middles, and ends. And so you can workshop scenes in constructive ways that you really can't workshop stories and chapters, because scenes can be moved around. Scenes are portable, for one thing, and they lend themselves to discussion and evaluation. So now I'm going to talk just a minute about what a novella is. And I want to say at the outset that the novella form is older than the novel form. But I'm going to skip over origins today. Those are in the book, and just share a little thinking on forms. I think of fictional forms as containers. I imagine them as vases, but you can picture them as bowls or baskets or boxes. The point here is that containers come in multiple sizes because they're made to hold varying amounts of things. And what we fill them with depends on the construction of the container. Generally, we don't load up baskets with rocks. Baskets are meant to hold things that don't weigh very much, like dried flowers or Doritos. Fictional forms hold narratives constructed of paragraphs that are composed of sentences that are built with words. Here I'm going to provide a necessary clarification. Throughout, for our purposes, the terms story and narrative are used interchangeably. Both refer to a recounted sequence of events, long, short, or in between. So if we use the container analogy to extend the discussion, we can liken a short story or a flash fiction to an apothecary bottle. Itsy bitsy, large enough for a tablespoon of water and a sprig of baby's breath. Most shorts can be read in the time it takes to eat a piece of toast. These flashes of insight come in under 1,000 words, and most often under 500 words. What's in them, you ask? Something small that hints at something more substantial. One of my favorites is Brady Udall's The Wig, which weighs in at just under 350 words. On a rainy weekday morning, a father finds his son at the breakfast table eating cereal and wearing a discarded wig. The sight evokes a memory of the man's late wife, the boy's lost mother, her hair only slightly longer and darker than the hair of a wig. Short stories vary in length from 1,000 to 10,000 words. The New Yorker short fiction ranges from 2,000 to 8,000. The smallest of these stories are akin to bud vases, while the largest will accommodate a full bouquet. That said, it's important to note that definitions are subject to revision. In the past 20 to 30 years, the average size of a short story has shrunk from 25 pages to 15 or fewer. Classics I first read as short stories Melville's Bartleby the Scrivener and Kafka's The Metamorphosis, for instance, have been recategorized. Both are currently considered novellas. Melville's masterpiece, which is a personal favorite of mine, weighs in at a scant 10,000 words, while Kafka's tale of the man who would be Beetle comes in at 13,450. In the 1970s, when influential scholars began publishing books on the novella, neither classic would have been included. Mary Doyle Springer, the author of Forms of the Modern Novella, specified the length as at 15,000 to 50,000. John Gardner discussed novellas at some length in his 1983 creative writing text, The Art of Fiction, Notes on Craft for Young Writers, and he put novellas at 30 to 50,000 words. In recent years, the small press publisher Melville House has exerted considerable influence on the public perception of the novella. Their series, The Art of the Novella, includes some 40 exemplars of the form, which range in length from 10,000 to 60,000. Note too that numerous classics classified as novels, The Great Gatsby is a great example, might now more accurately be classified as novellas. At 49,000 and some words, The Great Gatsby just squeezes under the fence set by Springer and Gardner, but it has room to spare using Melville House's definition. A contemporary classic by Sandra Cisneros, The House on Mango Street, was marketed as a novel when it was published in 1984. At 20,010 words, the book is a shortish novella. Like many novellas, The House on Mango Street features an isolated narrator at a crucial moment in her life, which is what we're going to talk about next. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is the characteristics of a novella. What is it that fits in the container? You see, we're not talking just about size. We're also talking about kind. What goes in the container we call a novella? Not just anything, as it turns out. Remember, we don't fill baskets with rocks if we want our baskets to last. As has been noted by those who admire the form, novellas are intermediate. They have the focus of short fiction, but they open onto a larger window, one that allows access to a life or lives in progress. That said, novellas are never panoramic as the novel can be. The author, Ian McEwan, likens reading a novella to sitting in a theater, watching a play or a movie. And if you've ever been to see a movie that's made from a sprawling novel, one you've read carefully and loved, then you understand that the screenplay container cannot hold the width and breadth of a big book. Attempting the adaptation of such a novel, a prudent screenwriter will dispense with a subplot or two. More of the story may end up on the cutting room floor. Occasionally, the finished product, the film, still sings, but never as loudly or as long. The container that is a screenplay and the container that is a novel, they're about the same size, which is one reason that so many novellas get made into movies and successful films. Those narratives are those that, the ones that it serves best are those that with a steady focus. A steady focus on what? I like the definition Philip Gerard provides in writing a book that makes a difference. A novella commonly follows the fortunes of a single character through a limited time in a circumscribed locale, focusing on a central idea. So let's start at the end of the definition and work our way back. A central idea, which might also be described as a theme or a focus, is one of the fundamental features of the typical novella. Novellas tend to be about something in particular. They are not told in passing, but to make a point. And sometimes the point is to sound an alarm. Here I think of Animal Farm. The alarm was communism. or Things Fall Apart. The alarm is colonialism. Fahrenheit 451. The alarm was television. Ray Bradbury wrote that shortly after the television started to become popular, and he was scared to death of the television. You may remember the walls, the animated walls that he discusses in that. Often the point is holding a mirror to the ills of society, of mice and men, mistreatment of the vulnerable, the house on Mango Street, inequality of women and minorities, passing, a societal preference for lighter skin color, and the awakening, suppression of women. About his novella, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, and its unlikely hero, a teenage boy with Asperger's syndrome, Mark Hayden had this to say in The Guardian. It's about how little separates us from those we turn away from in the street. It's about how badly we communicate with one another. It's about accepting that every life is narrow and that our only escape from this is not to run away to another country, another relationship, a slimmer, more confident self, but to learn to love the people we are and the world in which we find ourselves. Sure, it's important to entertain, but if you're writing a novella, you will also likely be entertaining an idea. And whatever the idea is, the subject matter must be of real consequence to you. Writers are at their best when they explore their fascinations and their deeply held beliefs, whatever those may be. So here's in a specific locale. Novels are expansive. One of my recent favorites, The Signature of All Things by Elizabeth Gilbert, takes off in Kew Gardens in southwest London and finds its ending on the island of Tahiti. In between, it touches down in various South American locales on to Philadelphia, the Galapagos Islands, and well, the rest is a blur. Novellas, on the other hand, are not traveling books. By and large, they're situated and settled. They've got roots, thank you very much. Some are named for places: on Chesil Beach, in Dorset, southern England, river runs through it, Missoula, Montana, Brokeback Mountain, Wyoming, the house on Mango Street, Chicago Barrio, Snow Country, a hot springs resort in Japan. Setting is so crucial to the construction of some novellas that the place takes the role of the adversary or the antagonist. A river, Heart of Darkness, the ocean, Old Man and the Sea, a snowy New England town, Ethan Frome. Over a short period of time, you will occasionally find an exception. For instance, Flaubert's novella, A Simple Life, skates delicately over decades of servitude that make up the life of Félicité, a French housemaid. But most novellas are circumscribed, spanning days and weeks, a season, or even less. They get in quickly, they have their say, and then they bid you a quiet, polite goodbye. Saul Bellows Sees the Day, for instance, covers 24 hours in the life of a young man named Tommy Wilhelm. Thomas Mann's Death in Venice spans a little over a month in the life of its central character, a middle-aged German writer. One of my personal favorites is Carson McCullers' The Member of the Wedding, which takes place over a few short days in August of 1944. The backdrop then is World War II, which looms over everyone and everything, even a lonely 12-year-old girl named Frankie Adams, who lives in small-town Georgia. Small cast of characters. Even if a novel is a house that will hold an extended family and friends, a novella is a one-bedroom apartment. A single person can live there comfortably and easily accommodate a frequent guest. That guest might become a significant other, and the two could still be comfortable, assuming they are flexible when it comes to sharing a single bathroom. Most often, the story's main character is introduced on page 1 and remains at the forefront throughout. The novella may be named for the protagonist, as in The Great Gatsby, Ethan Frome, Sula, McGlue, or the title may be the descriptor for the main character, as with the 2016 Japanese novella Convenience Store Woman, or The Member of the Wedding by Carson McCullers again, or Steve Martin's Shop Girl. Yes, I am talking about that Steve Martin, actor, comedian, banjo player, art collector, gifted fiction writer. It's really sickening when you think about it. One way or the other, and sooner rather than later, the main character of the novella will find herself in opposition to something or someone. Usually the foil will be another person, but not always. In Hemingway's Old Man and the Sea, the antagonist is the sea, which refuses the elderly fisherman its bounty for 84 straight days. And the protagonist of Death in Venice becomes his own worst enemy when he remains in Venice during a cholera outbreak. Because we are human beings, and most of us live and die by love, the struggle that ensues is often either romantic or familial. Take, for instance, Ethan Frome, besotted with his wife's cousin Maddie. The antagonist is Ethan's wife Zena, who decides to send Maddie packing. Jay Gatsby, newly wealthy, dreams of reuniting with his former lover Daisy, who is married now to established wealth in the person of Tom Buchanan. Family members can become formidable foes, as anyone who's read Kafka's Metamorphosis can attest. The novella form is ideal for showcasing all the ways we misinterpret the actions of loved ones. To mention again, an excellent example is Carson McCullers' small masterpiece, The Members of the Wedding. It's told from Frankie Adams' point of view, a troubled 12-year-old girl who misunderstands her role in the proceedings. If you haven't read it, Frankie is a member of the wedding, but she is not going on the honeymoon. And that's what she thinks is going to happen when she goes to participate in the wedding. She imagines going off into the sunset with the bride and groom. And it doesn't happen that way. A restricted point of view. The narration of the novella is usually limited to one perspective, that of the protagonist, though there are exceptions. In the opening pages of On Chesil Beach, for example, author Ian McEwan provides the thoughts of both the bride and the groom, though the narrative finds its focus with the groom. The single perspective need not be the narrator's, however. Although short stories and novels make use of a peripheral narrator and a frame structure, novellas often do. A peripheral narrator recounts someone else's experience, usually to a general audience. Nick Carraway is the peripheral narrator of The Great Gatsby. The story is not his, but he's privy to it. The same thing is true of an engineer who reconstructs the tragic tale of Ethan Frome. Your novella need not conform to any or all of the characteristics I've just mentioned, but when you begin weighing your story ideas, it's helpful to consider these hallmarks. As Boccaccio, Shakespeare, Chaucer, and Goethe knew, we don't write in a vacuum, we write out of a tradition. Over our lifetimes, we strive to contribute to that tradition, which is the least and the most any of us can ever do. So that's my little segment from the book. And now I'm going to come back to the writing prompt. So if you don't have paper and pen with you, you should hurry and get a paper and pen and just take a few minutes to do a little writing. Now that you have the ideas of what a novella is in your head, I'd like you to think a little bit more about it. What might be your novella? So you remember the story I told you about Hemingway's last book. He won the 1954 Nobel Prize in Literature, and the committee cited the novella as one of the determining factors. Funneling his feelings of failure into his fiction led to his greatest success. When I was working on this book, I sort of reluctantly sat down and reread The Old Man and the Sea. And I was so damned impressed with it. I couldn't, I've always been a skeptic where Hemingway is concerned, but I absolutely love The Old Man and the Sea. It's sort of the quintessential novella, I think. It's a novella in every way. Um, and, if he had not written that book, I don't think he would have won the Nobel Prize in fiction. Literary scholars contend that the Metamorphoses is a twisted version of Kafka's Life and Family. Kafka would, of course, be the Beetle. My novella, Treading Water, was sparked by the early and tragic death of a good friend. And just the other night, I was on the phone with my son, Devin. I had sent him a copy of the book because he's in it a little bit. And he's an RN now, and he went to New York last year to help out in the Coney Island Hospital in New York City. And he told me he would like to write a novella about his experiences working in New York City during the pandemic. So what about you? I want you to think about, do you have a real life experience that you want to fictionalize? So think about it. You now know the size of a novella, the characteristics of a novella. It usually features one protagonist, a couple of seasons, maybe, sometimes even a day or two, one place usually. So just put your thinking cap on and come up with a few ideas. We're going to give you about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about them. And then if you have questions about the novella or anything else, I'd be happy to engage them. I can't wait to see you all. Okay.